for you listeners out there, that when OOIDA and these state trucking associations, that are the chapters of the American Trucking Association, that when they're aligned to the point where they will put resources behind a lawsuit, it's big, it's massive. That when this industry that happens to be, particularly fragmented is unified against something, it's pretty bad. Welcome to Stream, a trucktractortrailer.com production. My name is Zach Miller. I'm your host, and I'm honored today to be joined by Narita Taylor, who is the media relations guru at OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Driver Association. Narita, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
You bet. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. I mean, this is, as soon as I saw the news, I knew I had to reach out to OOIDA. And the news, of course, I'm referring to is the decision that the Supreme Court made not to hear the case of brought on by the California Trucking Association related to AB5, which is going to have a massive impact on owner-operators in California and, probably ramifications throughout the country. So, Narita, if you can, please just explain what AB5 is for anybody who doesn't know.
Sure. So AB5 is the initials, if you will, for California Assembly Bill 5. And what that is a new state worker classification law that was put into place a couple of years ago. It was in 2019, almost a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And the basic gist of that was to address misclassification of independent workers in that state. Now, the problem that we see with this is that it's rather broadly written. And I think that the legislature that pushed for that agreed to do that, and any of the proponents that agreed to support that are unfamiliar with the trucking industry and some of the business models that have been in place for decades and served independent truckers quite well. So we do have an issue with what was put into place. Now, the California Trucking Association, they actually sued the state of California, and our association filed an amicus brief in support of that lawsuit. And if I'm jumping ahead a little bit, then I'll stop. But I just wanted to make sure that listeners know that this issue has been going on for a while. And like you said at the beginning, the most recent thing that's brought it to the forefront is the Supreme Court's decision not to review the case.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you brought that up and you phrased that way, just, to highlight the fact that, for you listeners out there, that when OOIDA and these state trucking associations, that are the chapters of the American Trucking Association, that when they're aligned to the point where they will put resources behind a lawsuit, it's big, it's massive. That when this industry that happens to be, particularly fragmented is unified against something, it's pretty bad. And that's exactly what AB5 is. And I don't remember the exact timeline, but I know that because your point about how they don't understand trucking is spot on, to the point where I believe the initial, this is how messed up things really are, right? I believe the initial point of this bill was to target those app-based companies, your Ubers, your Lyfts, your Grubhubs, your tech app-based companies. And yet California actually built a carve-out for those companies later on. So now AB5, which, the Supreme Court basically decided that's going to go into effect now, it's not even targeting the people it was intended to target, but it's really going to fall heavy on the truckers.
Yeah, I know of a radio personality who refers to the state of California as the land of unintended. He says the land of unintended Californias or something really like that. And I think that's very very accurate here, and it is rather ironic that it's going that direction. I think that the reason that could be explained here is that they want to address misclassification of port drivers, which we as an association recognize as a serious issue, and we agree that anyone who is under one of those types of contracts, we don't like those types of contracts, and by those types I mean lease purchase agreements. And lease purchase agreements are not just a California thing. They're not just a port thing. They're actually all over the place in the industry. And, we could spend a whole segment just on those, but I do think that is what they are targeting when it comes to the trucking industry and when it comes to port drivers. And we agree that state generals, attorneys generals should do something about those types of things. But this AB5 and the ABC 1, 2, 3, whatever you want to call it, yeah, it'll get rid of those maybe, but at the same time, it's something very problematic for what we will refer to as traditional leased owner operators.
Right, exactly. And so can you explain how the ABC test works and how they're sort of, using the ABC test as the justification for this bill?
Sure. So the ABC test considers all workers to be employees unless the hiring business demonstrates these following factors are established. One, that the worker is free from the control and direction of the hirer in connection with the performance of the work, both under the contract for the performance of the work and in fact. Number two, that the worker performs work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. And number three, that the worker is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature that is involved in the work performed. Now, I know that was a mouthful, and so what I'm gonna make it easy for everybody listening, and that number two, or sometimes we refer it to the B prong of the ABC test, that is the one that is the most broadly written and is the most problematic for leased carriers, because leased carriers are going to be performing the same type of work that the company is doing, but they're going to be leasing their equipment to them and getting paid for driving that equipment. So yeah. And I think that's where we are with this, and that they just don't understand that was put in place decades ago, and since then we've put in place what are called truth in leasing regulations and laws, and those things help protect owner operators, and as long as those are followed, then everything should be the way it should be for an owner operator.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the fact that the owner operate, if the bill was intended to protect the owner operators and to make sure they're properly classified, and there is backlash from the owner operators saying, no, we are currently classified, thanks, but no thanks, that should be a sign that clearly there's something off with this bill, at least as it relates to the trucking aspect of it. And, as we've seen many times, particularly when it does come to transportation policy, what happens in California tends not to stay in California and tends to matriculate around the country. So I have to ask, what you at OOIDA are hearing about some of the ramifications nationwide that this may have.
Well, we're not really sure. Now, I will qualify that with saying, we do know that New Jersey has a similar ABC test, and it's something that there is some opposition to. But like you said, what tends to happen in California doesn't stay in California, and it does set a precedent. It does set a concerning precedent that we would like to see some things addressed. And we have asked the state of California for some answers to questions as to how our members could comply with this new legislation. And just this morning, it just so happens that we sent another letter. We made another attempt at communicating with the governor of California, and I'll send this to you after we get off of here. And you can see we presented a pretty long list of questions that we think are pretty legitimate, and we think that if they were answered, we could figure out a way to make this work. But there's going to have to be some provisions put in place in order for that to happen.
Absolutely. And I think, look, I would have no idea, if he responds or what changes, they might look to make to this law. But I think the fact that we do have these supply chain crunches, the fact that especially the West Coast ports have been just slammed for the last 2.5 years. And again, the fact that the actual port drivers, the ones who this is going to affect the most, have issues with it. All that at least leads me to believe that there's a chance that they'll respond to the questionnaire and at least try to work something out here, because of the tenuous situation that they're in right now. I mean, it's a possibility. Let's put it that way. It's a possibility.
Yes, I agree. I think that there will be a response. I did see a report from a trade outlet just this afternoon indicating there may be some sort of response from the governor. We don't know what that is or what that will look like at this time. Hope maybe by the time this podcast airs, maybe there'll be some more information that you can add to it. It seems to be an ongoing, changing type of situation.
Yeah, and I think it will be. And I think that what's interesting to me is back in 2019, when I first became aware of AB5, I really didn't understand it that fully, I'll admit it. But learning about it more and more and more over the past couple of years, I think I do have that firmer grasp on it, and know that, yes, this is just not good for the industry as a whole, and it needs to be tweaked. And it's so wonderful that OOIDA is, always at the forefront of these battles, fighting for the for the owner operators, but really for the industry at large.
Yeah, and I'll add to something that you alluded to earlier about, well, things are bad if ATA and OOIDA are working together, and what I'll point out is that what that alludes to with the situation is how diverse the industry is. People think it's a little too cut and dry, and it really isn't. And each of the chapters of the ATA, they're in different parts of the country. They have different types of members, and to try to, paint a broad brush for the whole industry, is something that's just not going to work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Rita, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for educating us about the situation in California and some of what owner operators are going to face, in California and possibly beyond.
All right, Zach, anytime. Thanks.
If you guys like the content you see, please subscribe, and we'll see you next time on stream.